Hey everybody, this is Evan Rogers coming at you with another fancy language words video. These aren't getting as many hits, but I think over time they might end up dominating all the rest of the videos. These are all important because they're very important to understand, in English, but also because if you don't understand them, grammar rules will be very difficult to understand. When you ask questions about grammar online, people are going to be using these two words a whole heck of a lot. These are very important to Japanese. So transitive and intransitive. I will probably make an inappropriate joke. Let me have it. Come on, guys. Let me just have the bad joke. Before we continue, though, all of the extra content that I make that is usually behind a paywall, I'm making it for $1 a month on Patreon and Subscribestar. That's $12 a year, cheaper than a textbook. And you also will be supporting me making these videos every single, well, not every single day, but almost every day. It would mean a lot. Go head over to Patreon or Subscribestar and make some donations. Please, please, please. Also share. That's the best way to get this information out. Please share these videos if you can. Let everybody know that I don't suck too bad. I suck a little bit, but not too bad. All right. Transitive and intransitive. These are descriptions of verbs. And I want to emphasize something right off the bat. Almost everyone in the I can teach you Japanese community thinks transitivity and intransitivity. We're going to refer to both of these as a group of transitivity. So transitivity, underneath that is transitive and intransitive. People think this is the utmost important aspect of every single kind of verb grammar instruction. It's not. This is a big one. This is huge. This is a huge thing that you do definitely need to know very much. But a lot of people act like that's all it is. Oops, looks like my family's here.
A few moments later.
Okay, so transitivity and intransitivity are very important when talking about Japanese verbs. However, it's not everything. We also need to talk about affective verbs, which are affective predicates. But I think we're going to talk about it later in this video. Verbs of movement don't abide by the rules the same way that they're supposed to. For example, the verb to go, iku, ikimasu, is an intransitive verb, and yet the o particle still makes an appearance when that doesn't really make as much sense as it should. So verbs of movement break the rules, and verbs like arimasu and things like that, they start having screwy rules as well. So anyway, let's go ahead and talk about what these words actually even mean. So trans, means that there are two things that are interacting with each other over a divide. Or at least something like that. Again, we're using loose definitions. That's the core meaning, and then there's probably going to be some gray area, so once again, just deal with that. So transitive is basically when there's two locations, two things, and they overcome a gap, and they interact with each other. So, for example, the one that we're all thinking about and laughing about, transsexuals. There's the male and there's the female, and I know I'm going to get yelled at for that, but give it up, guys. Whatever. There's guys and girls, and they're operating over a gap. Does that make sense? The female is operating to the male over a gap, or the male's changing into a female, or whatever it all is. I'm not trying to be political. Okay, so transitive verbs. So let's talk about more words that have trans in it. Transcontinental. Transcontinental is when there's two or more continents, and they interact with each other over the gap, which is most likely an ocean. Or we have a word like transatlantic. So that would be like the same thing, but over the Atlantic Ocean. Or how about a transaction? It's when you make a purchase or something like that, and there's two people involved, and you overcome that gap. There's the store clerk, the desk, and there's you, and you're transacting with them, or something like that. Transportation. Notice the word transportation. So there's two ports. There's where you're leaving and where you're going, and you're operating over the gap in between them. So this is what this word means, basically. When there are two things that interact with one another over a divide. Okay, great. Transitive verbs are those where the subject affects the direct object directly. So when I punch you in the face, I and you're getting punched in the face. That's why it's called a transitive verb. There are two things that are interacting over a divide. I punch you in the face, right? So I and you, and there's a divide where I'm punching. Great. I eat celery. There's celery, there's me, and over the divide it goes into my mouth. That would be a transitive verb. And because they couldn't be bothered to come up with a more fun name, they just decided to name the next one intransitive. So not transitive verb is what that basically means, an intransitive verb. These are verbs where the subject just sort of acts, but doesn't actually affect another object, if that makes sense. So I am in the chair. Being in a chair isn't me affecting the chair whatsoever. I am in Ohio. I'm not really affecting Ohio, really. Other intransitive verbs might be we're gonna have examples, and I'm gonna use the one that I always use. The door is shut, or the door shuts. How about that? The door shuts. All right. Usually, but not always, if you see an O particle in your Japanese sentence, you have a transitive verb. Okay? That's basically how the rule works. Almost never is there an intransitive verb that uses an O particle outside of verbs of movement and a few weird ones. Okay? Verbs of movement are intransitive verbs, and they use an O particle. They're odd. They're a little bit odd. Because technically you are affecting an object when you go through the woods. Perhaps. It depends on how you define everything. Notice in the example, intransitive verbs, even in English, feel like descriptions. Exactly. So we're going to be describing things with intransitive verbs. Okay? So notice in the examples as we go, intransitive verbs almost feel like descriptions. So here we go. Number 1, I shut the door. Okay. The door shuts. Both verbs are shut. Notice how they use the exact same verb. I shut the door and the door shuts. But the first one involves two nouns interacting with each other. I and the door I am affecting the door. The door shuts is almost me just informing you that a door shuts. Hey man, does that door shut? Yes, it does. It shuts. The second one is an intransitive verb. The first one is a transitive verb. All right, another example. How did the window shut? Let's go up here. How did the window shut? Okay, so the window shut. Who shut the window? Notice how... What's wrong here? Why is it... Who shuts the window? No, this is past tense. Come on, Microsoft, get your head out of your butt. How did the window shut? How did the window shut? This is an intransitive verb because there's no object being acted upon. There's no subject acting upon the object. Well, there's a subject, but it's not acting upon the object. Who shut the window? Who is the person who shut the window? Thus, it's transitive. Number 1 is intransitive, and number 2 is just plain old transitive. Again, the first does not have two items interacting, whereas the second one does. Great. All right, let's go on to have some more. I eat pizzas. Pizza, interaction, it's transitive. It traverses the gap between them. So yeah, so I like this expression. Man, I'm so brilliant. I is interacting with pizzas, and I traverses the gap between them via the action of eating. So maybe that's an interesting idea. Via eat, the two nouns are interacting. All right, great. Write down what you see. This one, if you look at it, there's no subject. So write down what you see is the object. And actually, this is a clause. Hopefully you guys noticed that this was a clause. So the first verb is write. The second verb is see. The first verb's write. The first verb subject is not mentioned because this is an order. It's an order. It's a command. You write down what you see. This you see is a clause that is describing what it is that we see. So the unmentioned you, the first one, you write down, is interacting with what you see. Thus, it's a transitive verb. So notice I chose one that hides the subject in English. Write down what you see. I'm talking about you doing the action. Thus, there is a subject. The subject is you, and you're going to write down what you see. Transitive verb. All All right, he is sitting down. He is sitting down. All right, he is not interacting with any object. Right? He's sitting down. It's not like he sits down the chair. That'd be weird. But you could sit someone down, right? If I say sit him down, that would be transitive. But this, he is sitting down, intransitive. There's no object being acted upon. I hope that helps you guys out. Again, transitivity is very important in Japanese. It's not everything, but it's very important. And I can't stress how big this is. You need to understand how this works. If there's any questions, ask them in the comments. Have yourselves a happy Dappy Day. Peace out. And let's sing Vampirina.
We can sing Booty Vampirina.
You want to sing Booty Vampirina? What's that song? We're living the scream.
Whoa, Vampirina. I can make zoo. Vampirina.
Maybe blue with pointy teeth.
Me blue.